Hey guys, so I wanted to get into a little more detail about stress and how it affects your metabolism. More specifically, because we have people that are trying to do metabolism resets, or whether you're trying to lose weight or maintain your weight. It really matters if your metabolism is affected, because everything else will come into play. So I'm going to reference a book, and I will add the link to the bottom to what book it is. The author is called Robert Sapolsky. Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing that, but he's a professor, PhD, and he wrote a book on why don't zebras get ulcers, I believe it's called. Really great book. If any of this interests you to the effect that you truly want to know the nuts and bolts behind it, I really think that is a good book to go into, because he will go into the science behind everything. And this is specifically referencing a chapter that was in that book where he talks about stress, metabolism, and liquidating your assets is, I think, what the entire chapter was called. So basically, the metaphor that he gives in this particular chapter about stress and the metabolism is he compares it to a bank. Okay, so the way that it works is that with our metabolism, our bodies make sure that if we have extra of something, insulin comes into play and makes sure that we can properly store any excess nutrients. So that's why we always hear about insulin, and you may or may not know what it is or what it's for. Maybe if you're diabetic, you know a little bit more, because you're constantly trying to control it, but we may not understand that insulin is actually a good thing. It controls our fat metabolism, our glucose metabolism, helps make sure that any excess vitamins and minerals get to the right areas or get stored away for future use if we don't need them right away. So insulin is also often called the hormone of abundance, or the hormone of plenty, because when we have extra, insulin makes sure that it gets stored away properly. And what happens over time is that if we are stressed about something, or we work out, or whatever the case may be, when we need to get energy into those muscles, that's what makes sure that that process happens. So when it comes to our metabolism, what happens is that we are storing away this extra for future use. But if we go to exercise or come into a stressful scenario, our bodies call on that excess to be pushed into the muscles that we're using for that purpose. So if we're running for our lives, obviously, as I mentioned in the video before, we're making sure that all that extra blood is flowing to that area, and the nutrients are released into the bloodstream to help us to have the energy that we need. The problem comes into play where, as I mentioned before, we're doing this repeatedly. So when you have these constant stress responses where you think about something and it stresses you out, and then you either let it go or it's okay, whatever the case may be, you're doing this over and over. It's essentially like your assets, your savings. Say you have, stocks in a specific company, or you have an IRA, or you have whatever the case may be financially, you're putting in this extra. This extra goes into savings, and it's a good thing if you abide by the rules and you take the extra out at the appointed time. But those often come with penalties if we take from that IRA or whatever too early. So essentially, our metabolism will work that same way. When we are accessing these nutrients that are in the bloodstream, we're saying, hey, I need this extra energy because there's this, terrifying event, this run for my life type situation. All of that gets released into the bloodstream, and then we decide, never mind, I don't need it. So then maybe a little bit can go back. We try to put some back into it. Well, the problem is that every time you dip into that savings, you're paying a penalty. So maybe the first time it's not that big of a penalty, but eventually what happens is you're getting less and less of what you originally put into it back out. You're essentially liquidating your assets. You're paying this huge penalty over time from constantly changing your mind and saying, hey, I need it all, you know, sell all my stocks, and then saying, okay, never mind, and then you buy that stock back. Well, when you buy it back, the price has gone up. So you're paying for constantly changing your mind, saying, I need it, no I don't, I need it, no I don't, I need it, no I don't. And that's what you're doing to your body, because you're releasing this constant flux of energy into your body when you don't need it. So what happens is that, because insulin is what helps our body to know, okay, I need to store away this for a rainy day, I need to store away this for when I'm exercising and I need energy into those muscles, eventually we start storing more and more of it. We're releasing so much into our bloodstream. We have the fat cells that will accept this excess, and eventually they get full too. So we have this overload, abundance of energy with nowhere to go. And that's what happens when we start getting more and more insulin released into our bloodstream. First of all, we start to gain more weight because we have this extra energy that we're not using, we're not metabolizing it in any way. And then we also have where it starts to create insulin resistance in our bodies. So if we are someone who already has diabetes, maybe a juvenile diabetic, we were born with it, then this is going to exacerbate your diabetes symptoms. If we're someone that didn't have it, then because we are gaining weight from having this excess insulin secreted into our bloodstream, now once the fat cells get so full that they're no longer able to accept any extra, now our bodies are becoming more sensitive to insulin or resistant to insulin, and then we move into type 2 diabetes territory. So what happens is that you just start, all these factors start going wrong, because really it's about what happens to your body as a whole. So as we discussed before, that because of the constant, you know, just your blood flowing to areas where your body thinks that all the blood needs to be rushed to this area because it's an emergency. We have hypertension problems who also look into starting to have hypoglycemic or hyperglycemic problems as well, because of the fact that we have this constant glucose running into the bloodstream. And when you start having problems with, you know, your heart, with your bloodstream, with your sugar levels rising and falling out of control, and your body becoming insulin resistant or insulin sensitive, we start moving into what's called metabolic syndrome. So it's when we just have, it's an overall problem with your bodies. The metabolic damage that's being done from constantly stressing. When we have excess nutrients, we store away the extra. Insulin allows our body to know how to metabolize what. When there's an acute stressor, meaning just a brief stress, our body releases all that into the muscles that are going to save our lives. So the muscle that we're using, this is why typically the muscle that you're working out gets more access to the nutrients, and why you'll often hear bodybuilders or just fitness enthusiasts period sometimes recommend having a snack that's higher in carbs after you work out, because they say that that is the one time where you actually want that boost in insulin. You want those carbs to go straight to the muscles, because typically they get the override because they are the ones that you just worked. Your body's thinking they are the ones that are needed to save your life. So they transport all the minerals to the needed muscle. When we mobilize our stored energy, our body is basically going to shut down insulin secretion, which is not good, because our metabolism usually allows us to be able to store energy for future use. But when we're going through the process of chronic stress, remember, we're mobilizing the energy, storing it, mobilizing the energy, storing it, mobilizing the energy, storing it, and we're doing that over and over. So we're never getting 100% efficiency from those muscles. So basically with your metabolism, we have to remember that with our metabolism, like our digestion of food is like putting that money into the bank. That's the energy. That's when things are being broken down. The insulin is like converting your money into stocks and bonds and IRAs. And stress is liquidating those assets. Stress is saying, sell it all now, or let's refinance the home, or whatever the case may be. Essentially, you are liquidating your assets repeatedly to the point where the amount that you owe on that house, or the amount that you have left in the bank, or the amount that you have in your stocks and bonds is really not worth much. You do not want to do that to your body. What stress puts our bodies through is not worth it. And because we are in a Western society, it's so easy to tap into those stress hormones over things that are really not even worth it. And because of just the way that our Western society lifestyle is, simply getting older puts us in more and more danger for that. Because as we get older, we're becoming more and more sedentary, which means we're storing more and more energy already that we're not using, and we're not being active enough to actually use that energy up. But yet while we're sitting there, we're stressing as if we're being active enough, and oftentimes we're turning on those stress responses so much that we're essentially liquidating all our assets and ending up with what's typically deemed as metabolic syndrome, which is when all of these different processes of our body begin to just start crashing down on us. Because we may go to a doctor, and sometimes it's hard to catch those signs, because one thing may be kind of abnormal on the chart, but not necessarily completely abnormal. And what happens with metabolic syndrome is when, you go to the doctor and you get those charts, and it kind of shows, okay, where you're a little too far on this way, but it's not completely off yet, or you're a little too much this way, but it's not completely, good or bad. So what happens with metabolic syndrome is that you get so many things in the almost bad category, but because they're not enough to maybe push it over or make that chart seem, noticeable that something's going wrong, is that you just start having all these processes in your body shutting down. And then you end up with what metabolic damage, or what is deemed as metabolic syndrome, where your metabolism, everything in your body is just shutting down. And so trying to lose weight, or whatever the case may be, when that much stuff is going on in your body, is your body doesn't care. Your body does not care about those things, because everything is a stressor. Everything is an emergency, and you've liquidated all your assets. You really don't have anything left.